are the best YouTube channel out there. That's what I say.
Yes, the cancer community as a whole has a great depth to me.
So the woman speaking, her name is Leanna House, is quite obviously a woman of discerning tastes, superior intellect, and so forth. But she also happens to be the co-host of a very delightful and informative podcast called Thanks Cancer. I definitely recommend you check it out. I was actually a guest on their podcast about a year ago, and her and her co-host, Mihal, were on this particular series. It struck me at the time what a unique personality and take on the world Leanna represents, and figured she would be the perfect candidate to discuss a very complex and esoteric and very necessary topic, and that is the one of identity.
Going through like the emotional and psychological effects of what that does to your identity, and your body betrays you, right? So I had a bunch of identity issues, and I wonder if it's like an additional layer because it's brain cancer, because my identity doesn't sit in my breast the way that I feel like it sits kind of in my head.
So prepare yourself for what is to be a deep probing analysis of what is sure to be a groundbreaking and very important analysis. And oh yeah, there's some swear words in it.
But I do want to say things about windmills causing cancer, and
That's totally true, right? About windmills.
I mean, something causes cancer.
This is Rudy. He has brain cancer. This series is about much more than that, though. It's about people with all kinds of cancers and serious chronic illnesses who might help him process his own diagnosis. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's serious, but hopefully it's always interesting.
I won't take up too much of your time, but I wanted to catch up with you again because there was something when we last spoke, which was just about a year ago, maybe a little over a year at this point. You had asked a question about if there was issues of identity, and I didn't quite really understand it because I was still coming out of that sort of first year of clinical treatment, as you guys do on your podcast, talk about the different phases of recovery. I hadn't really entered properly the sort of new quote unquote normal phase where you're kind
Fresh
of
fuckery is what we call it.
where you start to adjust to like, oh, so this is life now. You're not dealing with like feeling incredibly sick and all that time. You may still have some physical issues and things like that, but it's, the worst of it is over, certainly. And you kind of get used to the idea of like, oh yeah, I might die. Okay, whatever, go on.
Just Wednesday. These are just Wednesday thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm in that phase now where I've kind of gotten used to that idea, and I've had now perspective of where I can look back at who I was before diagnosis and all that. And so that question of identity has really stuck with me and in some ways haunted me, like giving me a lot.
I'm sorry for giving you an existential crisis. I sometimes do that.
It was actually good. I think it probably expedited some issues that I needed to work through. As my wife likes to say, there's a difference between acceptance and having something ripped away from you. And I think it eased me more towards acceptance a little bit faster than feeling like, oh my God, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z again. I just need to deal with it.
The reason that I asked that question is because, so with the sexual cancers, the cancers of the testes or the mammaries or the ovaries, a lot of women who really identify with their breasts have issues after about like, who am I now? Am I still a woman if I don't have these woman parts? And certainly all cancers have that to some extent or another, but the brain cancer, we understand the brain as the seat of the self and consciousness and all of that. So the subtleties that you're dealing with in brain cancer around identity, because I've felt super fucked up about my body turned on me and my body tried to kill me, and what does that mean about who I am? And I just imagine how much worse it would be if like it was all in my head. I don't know. I go deep sometimes.
I hadn't actually really thought much about it. I remember when I first, because I live in Tennessee now, I haven't always lived there, but I remember a friend of mine, I was talking and I kind of joked about how many women there are in the South that have breast jobs. And I was like, it seems really odd. I used to live in LA and I swear I see more boob jobs here than there. And she's like, oh yeah, because I think in the South, sort of your breasts kind of are more a part of your identity and being a woman and so forth and so on. So if you're feeling lacking maybe there, maybe you might be more prone to that. I don't know. Is that, it might be completely a messed up way of looking at it, but it kind of made sense. But you know, I'm cognitively, I mean, I'm still like putting one and one together, I'm still great at, but I might take me a little bit longer. I'm more easily confused and disoriented. I have issues with fatigue, and I used to be a very sort of type A personality. You know, now I'm very much slower, less aggressive about getting things done, and less obsessed with stuff than I used to be, just because my body won't let me. And then also, there's also being that cancer person. You know, am I talking too much about cancer? Am I obsessed with it? But at the same time, it's like, how can you not? I mean, it really, I think that you've been through it.
Everyone refers their cancer people to you.
Yeah.
So like how can you not become the cancer person?
And it is so insidious the way it sort of infects all the different ways that you think about stuff. And I mean, I don't think I'd quite realized that when you'd ask the questions. How do you manage sort of that, being that cancer person, but also not trying to deny that it is a big part of who you are? It doesn't necessarily define you, but it defines large chunks of your life and your being.
I think it does take a while to like settle into your new identity. The way my sister describes it is myself and my identity got blown up. And now I'm in a gymnasium with like all of the pieces of myself that I have to like go through and decide like what's worth keeping and what's not. And like it really is that fragmented identity. You really do have to rebuild yourself. You're not who you thought you were. I mean, some people just don't deal with it. Some people just put it up on a shelf and they're like, you know, that was my 2 years of dealing with the cancer stuff and it's over. And some people can do that. I have never been one of those people.
Do you think it's healthy to talk about it as much as we do, or is it not healthy? Is it, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know it's how I deal with it is kind of never shutting up about it, but am I stopping myself from being able to move on and kind of accept things? I don't know. I really don't know the answer.
My sister's therapist, who does the Kindred Conversation on Twitter, one of her axioms is talking never makes things worse. I think that in order to work through things, and how I work through things is I like articulate and I work with other people, because this is too big of a thing for me to go through by myself. As I read other people's stories, as I hear how other people think through the problem, it's like I'm vicariously moving through these stages of recovery. For identity, it can be hard, I think, because there's a lot of like ready-made cancer identities that you can have. You can like have the like suffering, here's my GoFundMe. You can have like I'm a conquering warrior. You can have like there's a lot of ready-made cancer patients that you can be. That can be helpful in some ways, but I think in other ways, people go into it with a certain expectation based on what they think it means to be a cancer patient. And sometimes that can be limiting. I mean, I don't know. It's just all fucked up. And then there's like people who their whole identity becomes cancer. I think that it can be easy to become the victim when you have an identity where you're constantly like looking at yourself sideways, and when you're constantly like at war with yourself. Like that is a really hard identity to like become and step forward into the future with. Like, I am not one individual. I'm like the part of me that got cancer, and 33% chance I'll get it again. however much you make cancer a part of your identity, like just because this is how I identify today doesn't mean it's how I identify tomorrow.
This is kind of related to what you're saying. It's kind of the same thing from a different angle. You're done with chemo and radiation and all that. You're good now, right? Why does it impact people so heavily and for so long? I mean, people don't understand. Why do you think it is that people don't understand that people who have gone through whatever the cancer treatment is, there's so many of us who don't want to stop talking about it and can't stop talking about it?
People don't think about things that make them uncomfortable, obviously. And so being able to like put it in a box on a shelf and move on is much easier. A lot of people like do put themselves in your shoes and they're like, oh, well, if I was a conquering warrior, I could get over it, I guess. I don't know. I think it is a hard thing for people to understand, and it's especially as it relates to your identity being blown up and your like sense of self being completely destroyed.
When you're young and healthy and vibrant, you never think of yourself dying, but all of a sudden you're forced to think of yourself dying as a legitimate possibility. I mean, regardless of the prognosis and how early it's caught, it's always sort of a realistic probability. It's not statistically insignificant.
I think the case for most people is when you're going through treatment, like you are just keeping your head down and trying to check off the boxes. Like you are not thinking, you are not reflecting, you don't have any time. You're being poisoned with tear gas. Like you don't have time to think deep thoughts about like what is happening and what you've lost and what you've gained and how this has all affected your life. So the idea that a cancer patient could simultaneously deal with all of those physical rigors of treatment and also like the psychosocial emotional side, like I don't know, maybe there's a super cancer patient out there, but most people, like, it's a lot.
One issue that I have is actually survivor envy, because it seems like, like there's especially the more sexual cancers, as you say, like the breast cancer and the testicular cancer, whatever. It seems like there's and this isn't 100% true, I know that, but it seems like there's a higher likelihood of sort of long-term survival and fewer sort of like really harsh deficits that go on, even though I know several breast cancer people have lots of issues with like fibromyalgia and neuropathy and things like that, but
lymphedema.
But still, it's like I look at it and I'm just like, they don't know what cancer is. I have real cancer. In my darker, less attractive moments, I get like this. They don't know what real cancer is. And Megan Claire Chase actually talked to me, and she was about, like, oh yeah, that's survivor envy, where you don't feel badly about people dying and you're still alive. It's more like, why do they have it so much easier than I do? I have the real cancer. It's like,
it's cancer gatekeeping.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, I realize it's all awful. We all could die. We all have like different horrible things lording it over us in different ways. But like, we all have our not so attractive moments where we're like, oh, damn you and your ability to still run, 3 marathons a week and
damn you for healing quicker than I do. I mean, it's hard not to, especially in the age of social media, like seeing people who seem to have it together when I feel like such a hot mess. I think a couple of important things to remember, like people's social media is their highlight reel, and my highlight reel looks pretty amazing too. So like anyone can make a highlight reel. We talk in our Shades of Survivorship episode about how like everyone has a different cancer experience, and it's important to know where you fall on that spectrum, because like if I'm talking to someone who's BRCA positive, that's a different relationship than if I'm talking to someone who's metastatic breast cancer, because my relation to those people and how I communicate where I'm at, like you really need to know. Like I can't talk to a BRCA survivor like a metastatic patient, and you can say some really terrible things without meaning to. I mean, I think
it's so complicated. Molly Marco, brain cancer patient who's very active in Twitter cancer world, she talks frequently about she was never very interesting, and I disagree with her on this point. She was never interesting until she had cancer. She says, do you ever feel like that cancer has made you more interesting, or has made you less interesting, or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so cancer has definitely made me funnier. But I will say that cancer is the most boring thing about everyone I know with cancer. Like, you are not interesting because you had brain cancer. Like, you are interesting because you're like, oh, I'm just gonna make a video and keep making videos about brain cancer. And
tell me more.
Cancer is the most boring thing ever. Like, when people tell me their cancer story, and like, I want to honor it, and I want to hear like what they're saying, and I want, because it's a part of like processing it and stuff. But like, okay, so you found out you had cancer and it was shitty, and then you got treatment and that was shitty, and now you might be okay but maybe not. Like, we'll see. And like, that is everyone's cancer story. And like, it's boring. Me and Mimi always say, like, if cancer is the most interesting thing about you, like, get off my boat. Like, I don't want to be friends with you, because like, I mean, get something else interesting, like pick up a hobby or something. But I say this as someone who has like 2 Twitter accounts related to cancer and a cancer podcast. So like, not to get all the secret on it, but like, you're manifesting your reality. So you are creating your own identity that creates your own reality. And so imagine something amazing.
Did you enjoy the video that you just watched? Then please share it all over social media. And while you're at it, could you also go ahead and subscribe to the Brain Cancer Diaries channel that you're on right now here on YouTube?
Like, share, and subscribe.